Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Britt Simon here. How's things? How's your weekend starting? I hope it's well. Mine's good. Let's see who's around. Let's answer some of your questions. I'm glad to see Confusion is first in. I was getting a bit worried for a few weeks. Confusion, you weren't turning up. I'm like, wow, what's going on? Why so late nowadays? Sorry, I've been doing a few things, just gathering notes together, running my process to look at the data. So yeah, I've been doing a little bit of that and answering some questions and so on. So apologies. Hope I haven't kept you waiting too long. Can we assume that DV27 isn't happening? No, you can't assume that. I know why you would assume that. When it's contrary to all the other indications that we've got. But I've learned that some people, you can tell some people some things over and over again, and the words don't really sink in. They don't understand, or they fundamentally think that you're lying to them, or that you don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. So there's no point in me really arguing it with anyone, right? I'm not interested in arguing with anybody about this. It's just very clear. Now, could the government break the law? Absolutely, the government can break the law. They can be sued for breaking the law, etc. But DV27, running the lottery, is a difficult thing to sue for, in a sense. It is a little bit different to some of the things that we've done before, but we'll see what happens in the lawsuits, including the Ivanov lawsuit that does actually have a cause of action about the fact that the government have not run DV27. So we'll see. Do we have a chance after this time to receive a 2NL from Ethiopia in case number 13K? Look, I don't have accurate information, or enough accurate information, on all of the embassies to really have a clear picture of where the embassies have got to. I did think that we would see additional scheduling, and that has happened. We've had additional 2NLs going out this week. There's a couple of embassies, even in the Africa region, that have scheduled quite highly. But generally speaking, the scheduling is far behind. Perhaps that's a good place to start. Let me show you my report here. Let me show you that. Let's pull that across to this side. Yeah, 1 second. Okay. So I run this report I do it Saturday mornings. So Theseus updates his data on Friday nights every week. And so I run this report on Saturday morning. I actually have a task that I run for my day job, and I have to run on the first of every month. So it's kind of interesting. I just was thinking about doing those things this morning, and also did this. Anyway, so we can have a look at the data here, and we can see what the interviews have been like up to now. And we can only see the regional numbers. We can't see anymore the numbers per embassy. We don't have that data. So we can see the cases that get scheduled, but we don't know which embassies they're scheduled at. So there's been 403 interviews arranged in the Africa region. That's way, way below what it should be. If you look at last year, for example, at this time of year, they scheduled 2,000 cases. And if you look back in previous years, the Africa region can handle up to a couple of thousand cases quite regularly. So to schedule 400 cases means that there's been a deliberate decision at many embassies in the Africa region to not schedule cases, or to schedule very, very few cases. That's a problem. It's probably not going to be resolved to everybody's satisfaction. It won't be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. The damage is already done. If you look at the number of 2NLs that we know of, and there's probably a few that we missed in that time period after they changed the SEAC system. There would have been a few cases going dark, which were scheduled in December. And so we lost a few of those. So the numbers are slightly higher than we're showing here, but only very slightly. So 5,500 interviews, which would be in Africa region less than 10,000 people. It's not enough people to issue 24,000 visas. You have to schedule 30,000 people. And if you have the travel ban, which affects 39 countries, some of which are in Africa, you actually would have had to have scheduled more people than that, right? So what I mean by 30,000 people, that's 15,000 interviews is what they did last year, 12,500 the year before, 15,000 the year before that in Africa region, right? And that's, you can almost double that number in terms of people, right? So 15,000 interviews in Africa isn't 30,000, but it's close to that. 5,000 is 10,000 interviews less. That's nearly 20,000 people, that are missing from being scheduled. And some of these 5,500 cases will be affected by the travel ban as well, the 39 country ban. So it's clearly a brutal decision that has been made at some level. Someone's made this decision. Unfortunately, the lawsuits haven't turned up any smoking gun about that decision. There's been no cable that we have found in the discovery process that says, dear African region embassies, please don't schedule people. So we're to believe that magically all of these embassies came up with the same idea to deprioritize and reduce the capacity for their DV lottery casework. They all came up with that same idea, but the embassies in Europe didn't come up with that same idea. And they didn't do that same thing in Oceania region or in South America. Weird how that only happened. It must be something in the water in Africa. That's the only thing I can imagine. That's the only logical explanation. And if you believe that, you believe in fairies. Anyway, so talking about Asia, Asia has been current for quite some time, right? The de facto current. They've been tweaking the numbers in Asia, but there's really been no increase in number of cases that have become current, apart from perhaps in Nepal. So it's not a great surprise to see, a smallish number of cases being scheduled in Asia. It's just, that's the way it's gone. That's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's not terrible, right? Like Africa. In Europe, they've done a fairly good month. 1,200 cases in a particular month. Seems like, if we look at previous performance, it seems like, okay, it's back to these sort of good old days that we saw back in 2023. However, we've got to be a little bit cautious with sort of celebrating about this one. The overall annual performance is not that great. It's at least couple of thousand interviews shy of where it should be, and the increase only really happened in the last 2 months, right? So in the last 2 months, there's around about 2,000. So almost a third of all the interviews that they've arranged this year happened in the last 2 months of the year. There's something wrong there. There's clearly something wrong there, right? And the other thing is that the damage was already done in these months earlier. And the damage I'm talking about is that if we look at the numbers between 29,000 and 47,500, there are just over 6,000 cases in that that could have been scheduled, real cases that could have been scheduled. And you would normally expect something like 50 or 60% penetration into that number for scheduling, right? So we could have expected, from that range, roughly half of the cases in that range would have wanted to be scheduled. Actually, only 850 of those cases in that number range were scheduled. So it's not that good a performance, actually. It's the Hail Mary effect, right? I've explained this Hail Mary thing before. So a Hail Mary is a American football term, and it's used in other places too, where the quarterback throws a ball in the last seconds of the game. The team's about to lose, and their only chance is to score a touchdown in the last seconds of the game. And so the quarterback throws a massive, long shot straight into the sort of downfield, close to the end zone, hoping that one of his players will catch it. It's a desperate panic, move. It's like, why not try something, right? And that's what the Hail Mary effect really means when we apply it to DV lottery. It's a desperate panic effect. And it's a show that maybe it will pay off. And basically they're saying, okay, there's some embassies that will be able to schedule cases up to 47.5. So let's let those embassies perform. Let's let them do whatever they can, right? And that's why they moved the visa bulletin so high for Europe. The numbers don't really support what they did. The math doesn't support it. It was totally a Hail Mary situation. And, I wouldn't say I predicted a Hail Mary, but I did discuss it months ago and explained that it can happen in some years. We've had it happen in other years, recent years. The thing is, it should be a bit more organized than what they did. They didn't organize themselves very well, and clearly it's just another shit show. This government are just the worst bunch of clowns you can imagine. There was a thing yesterday. Janine Pirro had to basically dismiss one of her own cases. They had prosecuted this guy because he had vandalized. In the words of the government, he had vandalized the reflecting pool in DC, tore up the strips of this crappy job that Trump paid for. Now everybody knew that was bullshit. Everybody knew it was bullshit, right? Everybody knew that actually it was just a shitty job done by the contractor because Trump hires morons because he's a moron, and that's just what happens, right? And so shitty job. But they prosecuted this guy, right? Pretending that he was the vandal that had destroyed all this work. It was obvious bullshit. And then yesterday, Pirro had to file a motion to dismiss the case because they found out that actually the contractors just did a shitty job and it wasn't vandalism after all. Oh, well, what a surprise. This is just a clown show. But what they do is they deliberately feed this information. They tell people, hey, MAGA supporters, we're going to go after those vandals that did that nasty thing. They're probably lefties, and they probably did that nasty thing to our wonderful president's reflecting pool, and that's why it's now a bunch of crap and it's all full of weeds and mold and everything, right? That's why it looks horrible, because of the lefties, right? And to the MAGA morons, they believe all that shit. And they are not going to be paying attention when quietly on a Friday afternoon, Pirro then removes the case, scuppers her own case. It's a clown show designed for idiots, and it works for those idiots. They believe all this shit. Anyway, that's just a brief aside explanation of the nonsense going on. What does this 1238 cases mean for Europe? Well, it does mean that we've got good scheduling, around about 20% penetration. Is it 20%? 15% penetration into that number range. So there's a fairly good chance that you have been scheduled if you're in that number range. Fairly good. Not perfect, but fairly good chance, right? Will they schedule some more? I don't know. We'll have to see. I think if we get a suitable, if we get a good outcome in the Judge Leon case, and we get that fairly soon, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see some of these embassies that have already taken cases, or some of the embassies that have not taken cases, in all the regions. I would expect to see some extra scheduling going on. But it depends what the embassy what the Judge Leon decision is, and when that decision comes out, right? So if it happened, for example, in the next week or two, then yes, I would expect to see that activity, more scheduling. And at the very least, it would be scheduling for plaintiffs, but it could just be more scheduling, right? Depending on the order. We have to see what the order says. But if that order came out, let's say mid-September or late September, it would be less likely that we would see very much activity. We would probably only see at that point some scheduling for plaintiffs. And so, if you're a plaintiff and you're not yet scheduled, then you can't give up yet. I mean, people always ask me. This is a weird question. It's a weird thing. I get this repeating question a lot. People ask me, should I give up now? Should I give up hope? Right? It's a really bizarre question. I don't understand the question. I don't understand the thought process that gets to that question. Because what are they expecting me to say? Are they really expecting me to say, yeah, there's 2 months of the year left to run, but yeah, you should just forget it, right? That's the other thing people say. Should I forget it? Should I forget it, or should I give up hope, or should I continue to hope? I don't understand any of those questions because it's moronic. It's like, what are you going to do? You get some YouTuber says, yeah, you should give up, and you then give up. What does giving up even mean? You stop looking at your email for a schedule. Of course, you would look at your email. What does giving up even look like, right? Of course, you're gonna wait. Of course, you're gonna hope. You've got no other choice. There's nothing else you can do except hope and wait, and you'll do that until September 30th. And there's no other way of looking at it. So I don't understand this sort of really odd question of should I give up. I think is a daft question, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, there you go. Just talking about the other regions for a moment. 80 from Oceania, that's good. I think that probably means that Auckland got involved. They've been quiet for a little while. They've been delayed. I think Auckland got some cases, possibly Sydney. I don't think we'd have got 80 if Sydney and Auckland didn't get involved, but I'm interested if anyone can confirm that. In South America, 130, yeah, pretty good. Again, not where I want it to be, and the results for the year in general are not where I want them to be. 18,964 cases. Call it 20,000. Let's be generous. It's less than every other year. 24,000 in 24, 35,000 interviews arranged in DV23, 30,000 last year. Unless you schedule 30,000 cases, you can't give away all of the visas. Basically, that's the math. You undershoot if you don't schedule enough appointments. That's basically it. And that's in a year where everybody is able to actually get approved. Whereas right now we've got 39 countries where you've got a problem anyway in the ban, the travel ban, which Trump has imposed, right? And the whole thing about that travel ban, by the way, the 39 countries. Let me just repeat what I've said and explained in the past. The POTUS, President of the United States, that's POTUS, has the right to deny entry of any group of people he wants, but he has to justify why that is. It can't just be arbitrarily sort of blanket done on a bunch of countries or all countries, and we fought that to some extent in DV 2020. But the courts did say in various cases, including Trump v. Hawaii, which is the main case they always refer to. The courts have said, yeah, the POTUS of the day, the president of the day, does get to have this power, but it has to be reasonably exercised. And then there's this sort of side argument of, does that mean they shouldn't issue visas? And the impact team are particularly up in arms about this because they have won that argument before. The DV 2020 case had a 212F travel ban imposed on everybody because of COVID. COVID was the reason, and therefore the court said, yeah, that's fair enough. We'll let you keep that travel ban in place. But Judge Mehta forced the government to issue the visas at that time, which was in Gomez, in the 2020 case, which was in September of 2020, which was just a few months before we were about to see a new president, right? And the hope at that time was to say, yeah, well, if Trump loses the election, which he did, he lost the election, folks. Big news. He did. If Trump loses the election and we get a new president in, the new president might decide that they're going to let people in, and that's exactly what happened. Which is why visa issuance was important at that time. However, at this time, visa issuance is less advantageous because Trump is going to be the president for the next 2 or 3 years, right? So anyway, long-winded way of sort of looking at this question for you. Quite honestly, I don't know what they're going to do in individual embassies. So I can't tell you about Ethiopia, and I can't tell you whether they're going to get to your case number. It's just, you just have to hope. But again, don't ask me the question, should we give up hope? That's just nuts. And someone will have written that in the chat without a doubt, because I'm seeing that question every single day. I love Uncle Simon. Every time I see him, I feel like I won the DV lottery. That's a weird comment, but okay. I love you too, man, or woman. I don't know. When are we going to get the results of the lawsuit? I don't know. I don't know. There was an interesting lawsuit, really encouraging in some ways. There was a lawsuit brought, not a DV case, it was an EB5 case, but it's called Gomez. Gomez versus Rubio, but it's Gomez with an S, not Gomez with a Z. Our 2020 case was Gomez with a Z or a Z, depending on which accent you have. But this was Gomez with an S, right? Gomes, and it related to an EB5 application of this guy who has, unfortunately, terminal cancer. And so this was an interesting individual case. But what was interesting about it, it went before Judge Mehta. Judge Mehta is the judge that we had in the DV 2020 and DV 2021 cases. And he tore the government's non-reviewability and Karamova defenses. He tore them to shreds. I've said to many of you before, and I keep getting I'm really shocked that people think or ever thought that Karamova was going to be a problem, or that non-reviewability was going to be a problem. To be honest with you, I don't understand. I mean, it was so obvious that a reasonably smart lawyer could point out that this was not a decision that the individual CO had made, and therefore could not be shielded from review. And so, to me, the non-reviewability parts and the Karamova bullshit was always going to fail. Anyway, this Gomez case that was just published basically makes that very, very clear. It relies on Peterson, and one beautiful part in it was that Judge Mehta was able to cite his own decision in our DV 2020 DV lottery Gomez case. He was able to cite that. It's a beautiful moment because it's a judge citing himself, essentially, as being authoritative and saying, because I said so, and I'm the judge. And then that means something. I love that. I thought it was awesome. It must have been a wonderful moment for Judge Mehta. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, when are we going to get the results? That's the big question. We know, I pretty much know what the result will be. We will win somehow. It may be a split decision. We may not get everything we want, right? But we will win on some aspects of it. There's no way this case is just going to be, lost. We will win some aspect of it for sure. What exactly the judgment will be, I don't know. When it will be given, I don't know, right? Who it will affect, I don't know, right? What the government's reaction to it will be, I don't know, right? Well, I do know this. If we get a big win, they will almost certainly appeal it straight away, but the appeal doesn't matter because they have to operate under the instruction of the judge's order while an appeal goes through, unless they apply for and obtain a stay, which they're not going to get a stay on this thing. We need that judge's order, Judge Leon's order in particular. I'd like to see the other case as well, Red Eagle's other case in Northern District of California, but that case won't be decided until probably September. The hearing on that is at the end of August, and so we're definitely not going to get the result on that until September. But that's the one that Red Eagle case in Northern District of California. That's the one that has also the class action. So that might be a way that that we get if we get a class certified and a positive order to take down the case. That might be the way that all the people on 221G get their cases resolved. It may come too late to force much more scheduling, but it may be the thing that actually unlocks the 221G cases from the rest of this year. So that's my hope about that particular thing, right? Because we could easily see from Judge Leon, he could go down a path which gives relief to everybody, plaintiffs and non-plaintiffs, but he is, I tend to think he's probably going to be a bit more conservative than that, and we'll try and craft something for the plaintiffs. But the Judge Mehta example that we just saw in the Gomez case is really good reading, and will be persuasive to Judge Leon. Judges can make different decisions, but when they're in the same district like that, particularly, and when you're Judge Mehta is a senior judge in the same way that Judge Leon is, it would be very weird for them to go in two different directions on something as important as that. The Judge Mehta decision that came out in the Gomez case just this week, that's on the 75 country pause, and said that pause should not be applied to the plaintiff in their case. So it's 75 country pause is the same exact thing we're arguing. The arguments are very, very similar and the same. It dealt with and set aside the Karamova and non-reviewability stuff. Interestingly, Judge Mehta didn't go down the APA path. So I don't think they'd argued that in that case. I have to look up the documentation, but I don't think they'd argued that sort of, they didn't go down the APA path. It appears from the judgment. I didn't read it all perfectly, but I didn't see anything in there about, that vacatur is a possibility on APA considerations. So, which is what happened in the Dorcas case, right? So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. I think that other case, whilst not a DV case, is relevant and will be persuasive to Judge Leon. Whilst he could go in a different direction, it would be really weird to do that when Judge Mehta has just made this judgment on very similar, a very similar case in many ways. So yeah, we'll see. Waiting for DV to come back while working on EB2 visa. Yeah, fingers crossed for you. I hope it would be nice if you can get a DV, right? Hi, Joe. How you doing? No questions. Just happy to see you. Wish you and your family good health. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. That's very nice of you. Yeah, I want to talk about my wife sometime, but I will do a video about the healthcare costs that we've just recently been through, because they're just so extraordinary. I could not disclose that. So I've been wrestling over the last few months. I mean, obviously, I've been dealing with a health condition that my wife has been through. Many of you will understand what I'm talking about. And it's a long battle, and it's been a hard battle, but she's won. So that's awesome. But with that particular battle, the battle is never truly done, right? So there's always a little bit of nervousness about that. So that's one aspect. And she's entitled to her privacy and everything else as well. And I don't want to discuss too much about her situation, but I do feel like I have a responsibility to explain the shit show that is healthcare in this country. We've had excellent healthcare. My wife has been given fantastic healthcare, no doubt about that. But the way that healthcare is paid for and financed in this country is just so stupid. It's so moronic. You wouldn't believe how stupid this whole thing is. And so that's the bit I want to explain to people, to make sure you understand. When you come to America, you need to think about how you're going to get healthcare insurance. You just have to have it, really. Okay, let's answer some interesting questions. Hope you're okay. This is Alan from Lumbabashi. Lubumbashi in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, I don't think I've ever been there. But hi, Alan. How you doing? I'm glad you're here. Hi, Brit. Foes Trump has the right to run for the fourth time. Does Trump have the right to run for the fourth? Well, it would actually be the third term. So let's deal with some things that presidents can do. President candidates can run as many times as they like, right? There's no hassle with them running. However, a president cannot be, under our constitution, a president can't run and win a third term, right? Can't run for and win a third term. So he would be disqualified. You know, you can win, you can run for, you know, president and lose 20 times in a row. Like there's no restriction on that. You can't run and succeed for a third term. But what the MAGA morons like to believe is that somebody else would run as president. So you know, perhaps Vance or perhaps Rubio or perhaps some other poor schmuck would run as the presidential candidate with Trump as a vice president candidate, and then the president would then step aside, elevating the vice president to president. That's what MAGA morons think is the reality. Now, technically, that might even be possible, but you know, Trump's an old man, and you know his health is obviously failing. It's, you know, there's clear indications that his health is failing. You know, MAGA morons don't quite understand that, but there's a limit, you know, and he'll be what, 2.5, 3 years older than he is now, right? So I don't think he's going to make it that far, you know, to be perfectly honest. So I don't think we need to worry about that, to be frank, you know. And even if they do run, I mean, there's so much anti-Trump sentiment in this country right now, even from people that formerly supported him. I don't think he's going to get the sort of support he would need to be elected. He's going to be poisonous. If he were on the ticket somehow, or if he was in the background somehow, he's going to be poisoned. He gets incredibly strong support from those that support him. But if you look at the MAGA media at the moment, there's a number of previous supporters, influential people, who are now going against him. You know, the InfoWars guy and Candace Owens, and you know, I mean, there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of influential people who are now seeing what the rest of us knew would happen, that Trump just is, you know, not a great candidate, shall we say, in many ways. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about DV lottery. Hope you and your family are well. Can you please tell me regarding the non-plaintiff benefits from those legal battles, in which legal battle could benefit non-plaintiffs? Okay, so I think I wrote a note about this week, and let me recover this. I've talked about this before, and you know, and I've said a few things that you may understand, but let me just sort of bring that all together. So in a lawsuit, Judge Leon technically can only address remedies for plaintiffs, right? That's one statement that I've made in the past and is a true statement. However, there are some things that Judge Leon could do that would benefit non-plaintiffs, right? So one of the causes of action, one of the complaints about these policies that were put in place is that the policies were not put in place correctly. They were not done according to the APA rules. The APA is the Administrative Procedures Act, and it explains how policy changes have to be put in place. In some cases, they have to go up for public discussion. There has to be a waiting period and all sorts of things. There's a whole set of things that the government is supposed to do in order to make new policy. The government's defense to that is that this isn't real policy that they're making. It's just a temporary policy. It's not a final action, blah, blah, blah. That was decided, you know, that's been decided in numerous lawsuits, including by Judge Mehta in DC this week, that this is final action. And so these policies are real policies and were not put in place in the correct way. And so in the Dorcas case, the policies themselves were vacated, right? And so that means set aside or taken away, right? So if the policies are removed and deemed illegal, that would benefit all people, not just plaintiffs, but everyone. And so, Judge Leon may go down that path. That's a possibility, right? That's one possible thing. The next possible thing is that Judge Leon says, no, he's not going to go down that path. He's going to craft a decision that benefits the plaintiffs only, right? But because there's 2,500 plaintiffs, effectively, there's thousands of people. The government look at that and say, hey, that's going to be unfair if we apply this this policy to all those cases. It's going to be not only unfair, but it's going to be cumbersome. Therefore, we're going to remove the policy ourselves. That's another possibility. And there's also a possibility that the government just themselves admit, yeah, we didn't really intend for this thing to go, right to the end anyway. They've just made 1,238 people in Europe happy with the September interview, for instance. Are they really saying that they're going to invite those 1,238 people to pay their money for medicals and interview fees and everything else? That's not 1,238 people, actually. It's 2,500 people. So they're going to invite those 2,500 people to an interview in September and let them go through all the expenses, pay the $330 per person, and then give them 221G at the end. And for that 221G to just last until September 30th. I still find it hard to believe that the government would stand by that sort of policy. Some of you think I'm extremely naive. I don't think I'm being naive about that, to be honest with you. But so the government removing the pause isn't very far-fetched to me. It is to some of you, and some of you are instantly right now typing in, "Oh, you're wrong on that." Well, okay, only time will tell, right? We'll see. So there's various ways, therefore, that the Judge Leon's sort of action may cause a reaction from the government, and perhaps that opens the floodgates of non-benefits. Those things can happen, although strictly speaking, Judge Leon should really only craft his solution, his order to plaintiffs. But we could see something a bit more creative. Exactly that happened in the Dorcas case. So, we'll see. All right. Hey, Britt. Oh, and sorry, one last thing, by the way. The Northern District of California case, the Red Eagle case, it's a sort of a double-edged sword case. Curtis is applying for relief for his plaintiffs, but he also has a class certification, and the class would cover all DV lottery candidates, right? Now, in that case, they may or they may not certify that class certification. They don't have to. Whilst Curtis would like that class action to go ahead, he won't argue if he gets a win for the plaintiffs. He's not going to argue forever that the class certification is going to go through, right? So he would like it to be the case, but he's not going to, that's not the most important thing in that case. The most important thing is to fight for his plaintiffs. And so that's another way that non-plaintiffs could benefit. So that wouldn't be until September, but we would then see, let's say Leon has by that time ruled and he makes a plaintiff-only order. Then in September sometime, that Northern District of California could have the class certified. A PI could be granted that would cover the class, and that would lift the pauses for all DV lottery cases. So that's a possibility. It's another possibility. Okay. Right. Nicholas. Hi, Brett. How are you doing? I'm a DV26 winner. I have my meeting in Paris next Tuesday, August 4th. I joined the Impact Lawsuit second bus. Is there any chance to see them keep my passport to get it? Whether the embassy keeps the passport or not is not a tremendous difference. It's not the big difference some of you assign importance to in that scenario, because the embassy believes that it's fairly easy for someone to give them the passport back if they need it, right? And that introduces a day or two delay. It's not really very significant. So even if your embassy says, here's your passport back, it doesn't mean that you should assume that you're never going to get the visa, right? You're in the impact second case, that's under Judge Leon, that's being combined. That Saito case is now being combined with the Ivanov cases. And so there's a lot of very good argument combined within those cases that is going to be very persuasive as part of that whole case. And I fully expect a win for the plaintiffs at the very least in that case, right? So when you go for your interview, you can feel pretty confident, I would say, that you're going to have an ability to be issued before the end of September. Hopefully, you will find that we'll get an order, pretty soon, and even within August, you'll be able to get your case issued. So fingers crossed. We'll have to wait and see. But don't worry about if they decide to give you your passport back. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's really not a problem. I've known them to print visas while people's passports were being forwarded back to the embassy. They don't have to have the passport there to print the visa. Okay, so some of you get too freaked out. Some of you also think there's I've enjoyed around about 50 or 60 questions from a particular guy asking me questions in the Brit Simon blog. And for a long time, his questions were pretty reasonable. And then at some point, and I'm talking about you, John, at some point he got really despondent and suddenly talked about it will be catastrophic. At the time, this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he said it would be catastrophic if we didn't get an answer by the end of July. And at the time, I'm like, I don't think we're going to get an answer by the end of July. I think it's going to be early August. And I've said that already on some of my lives. And so, I'm like, why are you talking about catastrophic? It's only really catastrophic on September 30th, right? Until then, pretty much everything can happen. Because, there are, in every single year, there are people whose interviews are arranged on September 30th. And those people can get issued because they can be approved in the interview. The embassy can update their records to show that case is approved. And the visa is printed in the next few days in October. That's perfectly okay. There's no problem with that, right? Even if somebody didn't have their passport with them on the day of interview on September 30th, that still wouldn't be a problem. So, some of you get way too worked up over nonsense stuff. And that particular guy wrote to me again and said, is it catastrophic now? And I'm like, no, it still isn't catastrophic. It's not going to be a catastrophe until everybody has lost their chance, which is September 30th, at the end of September 30th, right? October the 1st. That, if we didn't get an order by then, that would be catastrophic. Until that point, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it affects the number of people being scheduled. That's really what happens. Anyway, I had many news and videos on YouTube that telling ICE at airport, will it affect DV winners? No. Yes, ICE are at the airport. They're hanging around acting like a bunch of buffoons. It doesn't make any difference. And it's not going to affect DV. There's a lot of angst, a lot of emotional angst about ICE hanging around in various places. They were in my town recently, and they put on a little show. It's like a little clown show they put on. They dress up in these fancy costumes, saying ICE and whatever, and it's just cosplay. It's what we would call cosplay. And they go around intimidating people, and maybe they arrest some people, and and occasionally, unfortunately, and very sadly, they hurt people because they're badly trained and stupid, and armed, which are all a bad combination. You shouldn't give weapons to stupid, badly trained people, in my opinion, but they do, and so bad things happen. But you don't need to worry when you're arriving at the airport or when you're going through an airport as a DV lottery winner. They're not looking out for you because you're a DV lottery winner. You've done things the right way. You're a legal immigrant, right? You've done things the right way. You're fine. Don't worry. Relax. Hi, Simon. My 40K case is now in current. Do you think there's a chance of getting an invitation to Montreal? Again, I don't know what Montreal are doing, right? I don't know how far they're going in terms of interviewing schedule. I haven't heard any other people talking about interviews at Montreal, funny enough. So I don't know. Let's see. Morning, Lucas. When is DV27 starting? Oh dear, very good. Thanks for teasing. 1, 2, we are ready for you. Greetings, Uncle Bit. I hope you're doing well. Thank you, I am. Thank you for everything you've done. You're welcome. Will embassy issue visa for me if there's 2 or 3 days left to expire my medical? They will. So even if there's only 1 day left before your medical is expired, they could issue the visa on that basis. However, they will probably say to you, hey, your visa will be issued with 1 day of validity. Can you use that? I mean, it's not likely that you can get a plane and get into America before that validity is gone. And so they will probably tell you to repeat the medical at that point. This Gomez case that was published this week, it was published yesterday, I think. It did refer to the medicals. I mean, the lawsuits are not going to give an out on the medicals, right? It said that the medical may need renewal in that case, and didn't attempt to challenge that. That's part of a procedure. That's part of the law that they're not going to challenge in the lawsuits. They're not going to suddenly say, "Oh, don't worry, the medicals can we the court decide that the medicals can be extended." The government could extend the medicals, but I don't think that's going to happen, right? I think they're going to insist that you repeat the medical, and so that's probably what you'll have to do. Some people, by the way, are being told that by the physicians that the physicians won't schedule the medicals until the embassy tells them to do so, and the embassy won't tell them to do so until the pause is lifted, right? At least for those cases. However, in some countries, people are repeating their medicals because the physician is happy to take the money. And they're saying, okay, well, if you want to repeat your medical, it's another $300 or whatever it is, another $400. But if you want to pay that, we're not going to say no to the money. So, they'll let you go ahead. So you need to check with your physician about what rules they will apply. Okay, you need to do that. You can't assume anything about DV27. No one's stopping you, but we will only know when we know. Absolutely. Curtis mentioned he'll find an emergency motion in the first week of August, since that's when the urgency for DV27 becomes relevant. Has anything like this happened before? If so, how it plays out? No, I don't think there's ever been a delay. Certainly, there's never been a delay this long. There's been a couple of years where there's been some misstarts, right? There's been a couple of years like DV 2012 had to be sort of cancelled and restarted. The entries were taken from the wrong batch. They actually announced the results. The results were realized to have been wrong, and they redid the whole draw and re-announced the results. In 1 year, which was more recently, they cancelled the entry period and restarted the entry period. And so, during that same month, they said, hey, we've already messed up. Some people's entries were, not recorded correctly. And so we're going to restart the entry period from this date. So if you entered before, ignore that, enter again, right? They did that. But there's never been a delay this long. It's interesting. I hadn't heard Curtis. I didn't watch a couple of lives. I've been very busy the last few weeks from my job, and so I haven't been able to watch many of the lives all the time. So I didn't realize Curtis had said he's going to file an emergency motion. But right now, Curtis is looking for reasons to file any updates in the Leon cases. It's just the way it works. It's sort of subtly nagging Judge Leon, hey, we're still here, we're still waiting for your decision. So I'm not surprised he's doing that, to be honest. What should DV27 selectees expect from this month's visa bulletin? I don't know. It's going to be a fun one. I don't know. Are they really going to record for posterity? Because these visa bulletins sit on the shelf forever. I mean, you go back and look at these things for historical time. Are they really going to record in there? Hey, we screwed up. We haven't run the entry period for DV27, so there's no point in putting numbers in, in this month's visa bulletin for DV lottery. Are they really going to put that in that section? That's a possibility. But the other possibility is they might just publish some numbers. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if they do that. I would not be at all surprised. So, we'll have to see. I'm very intrigued. We'll have to see. Lucas, on a positive note, looking like early August for an order in Ivanov. Yeah, I think it's always going to be early August. It looks very, very comfortable. And it looks like, Lucas, as you well know, it looks like we'll be seeing a good order. Hello, good morning. So I made a mistake on a question TS260 about me ever applying for an immigrant visa. Should I wait and correct it at the interview oath or itself, or unlock the DS260? You can bring it up yourself if you're worried about it at the interview. Don't correct it on the DS260. There's no real need to do that. You have an opportunity at the interview to correct anything that you think is wrong. And so if you want to bring it up, you can do. It's your decision about that. I'm not going to go into detail about that. Okay. What should we expect regarding DV27? Oh, you just asked that, right? Is 6 to 8 weeks realistic to have an AOS case adjudicated? How can you make sure USCIS speeds up the process? Thank you. So I can tell you that every year there are people that become current in the July published visa bulletin, which is called the August visa bulletin, that become current for September, and they do AOS, and generally speaking, they almost always make it, right? But that's where they use the early filing policy, and I suggest strongly that at this time of the year, it makes sense to use that early filing policy. There is always a chance of rejection of a case that uses the early filing policy. They shouldn't reject it, but sometimes they do. There isn't a lot of benefit in using the early filing policy in the early months of the year. I would not suggest you do it in the early months of the year. But when we get to this time of year, you absolutely should be using the early filing policy, and you should be declaring loud and clear on the front page of your packet that you're using the early filing policy, and show the early filing policy. It's in writing. It's published on the bloody internet. USCIS has that, so you should be printing out that page that describes the early filing policy, and you should have in sort of big Sharpie letters under the terms of the USCIS early filing policy. I'm filing this early, right? So don't reject it, you muppets. Write something like that, right? And so make sure it's not rejected. Now, if people choose not to do that, and there have been cases in the past where dopey lawyers don't understand about the early filing policy or dissuade someone from using it, and so they file on September 1st. There have been cases like that, and some of those cases make it through, some don't. Some of them time out, right? So it's a bit of a toss-up at that point. But if I were you, I would be filing no later than now. You could have filed as soon as you saw the visa bulletin out. But yeah, is 6 to 8 weeks enough? Yeah, it's just 8 weeks is enough. 6 weeks is just about enough. 4 weeks is getting tight, and it's possible, but it's risky. Okay, so nothing's ever certain in adjustment of status cases or DV lottery. I mean, you only are sure when you see that card is being processed thing in adjustment of status, or you see the visa in your hand. Until the visa is in your hand, it's not certain. Even if the embassy is holding your passport with a printed visa inside it, and they're about to ship it to you, that is still not for certain, because even in this year, we saw some cases with cancelled without prejudice. So that caught a few people out in December. So until the visa is in your hand, it isn't guaranteed. Okay. Britt Simon, I know. So there's not a single hint, leak, rumor, or update about the DV resume at all. How is this possible? It's possible. I mean, what can I say? We're seeing how it's possible. We don't need to ask how is it possible. We're watching it in front of our eyes. You know. What do you think we'll see October DV? Yeah, already asked and answered. My case number is 2026 AF41. I received my appointment for July 27th, but my appointment was cancelled before the process change for realignment is for Johannesburg. I'm in Zambia. What's next? I don't know. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to push, contact the embassy, contact the new embassy, push and ask for, for your interview appointment to be re-established. Do all that you can. Don't just sit there and wait for it to time out, right? Do all that you can. Once the judge issue a final order to lift the pause, can the government re-pause the process? Not really, no, because they would be in contempt of the court. So no, we won't see that. So thank you very much. So no, we won't see that. I mean, can they come up with other stupid pauses and other stupid things? Yeah, they can do, but again, that would be contemptuous of the court's order. Honestly, we're not going to see those things. You guys, some of you Debbie Downers that think they're just going to ignore the judge's order and that sort of thing. You don't know what you're talking about. Just wait. You'll be fine, right? Just relax. Hi, you're the only hope in this dark time, and only your videos and info is checking my sanity. Wow. I'm sorry that you feel that way. It is dark times, yes. But yeah, cheer up. Hi, Simon. Can we know if there's a backlog about the embassy? So if we don't have the data to support it, but you can talk within your community, right? And if you find out that your embassy is only scheduling up to case number 13,000 and your case number 18,000 or something, then you know that you're not being scheduled because of backlog, right? So it's pretty obviously a backlog. And only by talking to your community, like people, other DV lottery winners, hopefully you're in contact with some of them in some of the online channels, WhatsApp channels, Telegram channels, or whatever. Or you've seen information at my DV tracker. Maybe you've got some information that way, but we don't know the precise data on any embassy. So, it's unfortunate. We might get some information about that, by the way, in the lawsuits, because if Judge Leon publishes an order, it might sort of say you've got to prioritize these plaintiffs, and then there needs to be lists presented of all the plaintiffs. And what we've seen in the past is they have shown actual lists, the AV queue lists, which are the queue of people waiting for an interview at a given embassy, and they've shown here's an individual, he's a plaintiff, he's on this list, but he's 698th in line or something, and that's why he's not being scheduled. So they have shown that sort of information in the past. So we might get to see some detailed information as part of the lawsuits. We'll have to wait and see. But it has happened before. If you get selected for Greencard lottery, do you need to have a job ready for you in America? No. No, you don't. It's not a job-based application. There are employment-based routes of immigration to this country, but DV lottery is not one of them. So no, you don't actually need a job lined up for you. Now, there is at least one embassy, I think it's Tbilisi, that has recently been telling people to provide a job offer in order to avoid the public charge concerns. It's got so bad at that embassy that for a while they seem to be encouraging people to make up bullshit job offers, right? Which I strongly discourage you from doing. Don't do that under any circumstances. If you think that you can get a job offer from a mate who will write you a letter saying he's going to give you a job, but it's not really a true job, that's fraud. You don't want to do that, right? Don't do that. Now, if you've got some sort of niche skill set, that means you have an American company who's willing to hold the job for you. That's pretty unusual, and it would normally only happen in the case of you've got a relative or something like that. Otherwise, why would an American company hold open a job for you to go through this long process of DV lottery, and they would not fill that job with a local person? Why would they do that, right? It doesn't make sense, right? So it has to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, then it's probably fraud, and I don't think you should do that. But if your family owns a restaurant or something, and they're saying, yeah, we're going to give you a job, and we're only going to give you a job because you're family, then that's fair enough, right? That's okay. That's reasonable. That's a believable situation. But other than that, yeah, don't just make it up. Hi, Yasa, how are you doing? Greetings from Cairo. Yes, less than 58 days to go, and some people didn't get their 2NL yet. Do they still have a chance to assuming that Cairo Embassy didn't schedule interviews for 4 months? Yeah, so I think we're probably going to need to see an order from Judge Leon in order to cause more scheduling to happen at Cairo. That's what I think is probably going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. We don't know for sure, but it seems unlikely that Cairo is just suddenly going to wake up from their 4-month sleep and suddenly decide to schedule interviews for themselves, right? Do you really think the 75-country pause will be lifted before Trump leaves office? Is very frustrating. I think it's going to be lifted before the end of this fiscal year. Greetings, Uncle B from Nairobi. In case an order is already issued by the end of August, can they still schedule interviews with 4 weeks that will be remaining by the end of August? Thanks, we appreciate it. Again, as I've explained before, in DV 2020, we got a court order on September the 4th, a Friday night, right? So really, it was late on a Friday, and they could have ignored that on the 5th and the 6th, and maybe not started scheduling until the 7th. What they actually did was they got the order on the Friday night, and by the Saturday and the Sunday, KCC were already scheduling cases on the Saturday and Sunday, and many cases. And they scheduled 7,000 cases between September the 4th and September the 30th. Some of them were being scheduled right up until the 29th of September, being scheduled, right? They're sending 2NLs out until September 29th. So yeah, they can do amazing things when they want to, right? So yeah, don't worry about 4 weeks. A lot can happen in 4 weeks. Which visa bulletin will they release for this month in DV selection? Same question. Any updates on the consolidated lawsuit? What are your expectations? I think I've made my expectations clear. We're going to get a win. I don't know what that win will be, right? And I don't know how complete it will be. I don't know how much of a split decision it will be. In the Gomez lawsuits in DV 2020, I just stumbled across an article I wrote way back then talking about that being a split the baby type of decision. It was a win, but it wasn't everything. It wasn't a win on every part of it, right? Judges often do that. They rarely give one side all of the benefit. They normally sort of say, look, we're going to grant in part and deny in part this, this. So they might. There are multiple causes of action, particularly on the combined lawsuits in Ivanov. And so they might sort of, the judge might say, I agree with this point, I agree with this point, I'm going to do this and this and this, but I'm not going to do that and that and that. That's what I mean by a split decision. So we'll have to wait and see. If I get selected for DV lottery, do my chances to win the lottery next year decrease after? No, every year is individual. If you've won before, or if you've not won before, or whatever, it makes no difference to your chances in the next election. It's kind of like this classic problem of tossing a coin. People think that if I toss a coin, it comes up heads or tails, right? It's one side or the other. People think that if I toss a coin that comes up 30 times tails, that the chances of it coming up heads the next time must be higher the next time you toss the coin. In fact, the chance is not changed at all, right? The fact that you were selected before or not selected before has no effect on your randomized chance in selection of a following year, unless you're a moron. If you're a moron and you can't take a photo, and you consistently get the photo wrong every year, then the reason you're not being selected is because you're a moron and you can't take a photo. I'm being horrible, aren't I? And so, and the chances are, unless you go and use dvphototool.com, and I'll plug that, unless you use that, you're not going to fix this moron problem you've got, and you can't take a photo, and so you're consistently going to not be selected. But yeah, other than that, ruling out sort of, the fact that you may have made yourself unselectable through fraud or through a bad photo or whatever. If you are selectable and you're not selected one year, it makes no difference the next year. Or if you are selected next year, it makes no difference the next year. Okay? It's random. It really is. It's random. I know some of you don't believe it, but it's random. I kind of proved it. Technically, I've proved it. But I understand it as well, so that's why I know it's random. Been waiting for the US diversity visa opening since last year, but instead applied for the Australian lottery visa. That's the next best option. I didn't know there was one. Wow, Struth. I didn't know there was an Aussie lottery. Maybe I should become expert in that. If I get selected for DV lottery and somehow can't get the green card, do my chances to... Oh, here we go. I've already done that one. Brit the King. I agree, sad. Is there a specific deadline for the government to run DV27 before 30th September? What's the deadline by law? Okay, so the reading of the law, having been pointed out to me by some keen-eyed observers, as I read the law now, I would say yes, there is a deadline. They are supposed to run a 30-day entry period within the fiscal year that is prior to the lottery period that they're talking about. So, so realistically, they need to do a 30-day entry period that must finish before September 30th, or on or before September 30th of this year, of 2026, right? Because otherwise they'll have missed that part of the regulation that they've published, their own regulation, their own rules. They'll have missed that part. Now, will they do that? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that seems to mean that the people that are betting that the announcement will come mid-August and we'll see the entry period start, let's say late August, those people are probably, in fairly good, strong position to be right. That's probably likely. So I think, over the next week or two, we might see an announcement of DV27, and we might see it starting late August. Right? That's kind of what I think. Just to confirm, my case number is 21. I haven't received 2NL, and I'm from Kenya. Yeah. Some people are going to miss out this year, right? It's the way it happens every year, but this year is particularly bad. And you could see from the data I presented earlier, in Africa in particular, there are a lot of badly behaving embassies. And so, yeah, unfortunately, some people are going to miss out. If the 30-day... great opening rant, Uncle B. Confusion only comes to the rant, so I have to make it. Just for you. Like the stream and subscribe. Let's get to 100 likes. Yeah, let's do that. There's a guy that does. I've got a TikTok account as well, but I've never really done anything as Brit Simon on TikTok. I just sit there and I scroll through TikTok. But there is a guy who takes my clips and he puts them on TikTok. He's got an account and he gets hundreds of thousands of views on my videos. Well, his videos of me. He's copied from me. And somebody asked me last night. Funny enough, I was at a friend's for dinner, and I impressed the 16-year-old daughter of the friend by saying, "Hey, I've got over 100,000 followers. It gives me some street cred with these, youngsters." And I explained about this guy that's copying my videos, and she was horrified. She was like, "Why aren't you suing him? Because that's what 16-year-old thinks that life is like. That you sue people left, right, and center. And why aren't you suing him?" I'm like, I don't really care. Like, whatever. I should probably care. If I cared about income from TikTok, for example, I probably would care a little bit more. But I don't get my income this way. Will the second round of group lawsuits conclude by the end of September, regardless of the final outcome? As I understand, visas can't be preserved after 30th September anymore. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Technically, I guess we would have to see whether the, if we didn't get an order, if we literally didn't get an order, which I think is a very far-fetched scenario. I don't think that's very possible at all. I think that's like, I think it's more likely that we'll see an announcement of aliens from Mars landing on Earth than that, right? That's how much I think that's a possibility, right? But technically speaking, I guess the lawyers would have to then decide whether they continue and try and take up the argument of preservation. But once we're past 30th of September, I think even preservation is a non-starter, and it's probably a non-starter in the DC circuit more than any other circuit. So, I think we're pretty much done at that point. How, Simon, do you think Judge Mehta's De Mora Gomez versus Rubio ruling, finding the 75 country pause unlawful, could help Ivanov, since both cases are in the DDC? Absolutely, yes, I do. I've just seen your username. You got to tell me how you chose that username. That's interesting. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's going to be. I think it's going to be helpful. I would not be at all surprised to see the lawyers lodge some sort of motion this week, pointing out that judgment. It wouldn't be a shock at all, because yes, I think it's going to be helpful. It's helpful in a number of ways. It tore down Karamova very well, tore down the non-reviewability very, very well. It said the 75 country pause should not be applied to that plaintiff. So yeah, I mean, it's not a DV case, but it's pretty close. I feel it's a very good case for us to use as supplemental authority in our cases. So yeah, I think it'll be useful. Hey Daniel, how are you doing, you Northerner? I was just with some Northerners yesterday. Hope all is well. I thought I would say hello from the Northeast while others are worried and giving up hope. Everything right now is out of our power till something changes. Yeah, that's a really good point. When you can't do anything about something, there's no point in stressing yourself and worrying about it. You just have to accept that some things are out of your control. That's where we're at right now. Anyway, nice to hear from you, Daniel. I hope you get selected in one of the lotteries, because we've got to continue these chats. The North and South have to come together, Hi Simon, I'm doing AOS DV26 3000-ish on Red Eagle's second lawsuit. Is there a way to contact the embassy and get called for interview? Had biometrics done last year. Confusing. I get very confused, and sometimes I question myself. Is my dyslexia causing me problems here? You're talking about contacting the embassy. Why is an embassy involved in an AOS case? There's no such thing. Do you mean the field office? So if you're in the Red Eagle second lawsuit, you should probably contact Curtis and talk to Curtis about the fact that you're in his lawsuit. It's under the NDCC, Northern District of California, NDCA case, and maybe the government's lawyer in that case can be helpful in getting your case adjudicated. So in some of the cases, and there's been, I think it's in the low 20s now, where under the Red Eagle cases, under Ivanov, there's at least 20, I think actually above 30 people have been approved, doing adjustment of status. And they were approved because the Dorcas case set aside some policies which were similar to the policy that is stopping your case being approved, right? And the Dorcas case did not set aside the 193 policy, but the government, for some reason, in several cases, multiple cases, stipulated that the policy wouldn't be applied to those cases because they were taken down in Dorcas. I don't really understand how that all happened, but and so it's not a guarantee that it will happen again. But I think Red Eagle may be able to sort of push a button for you if they're prepared to do that. Now, they're extremely busy. They've got multiple lawsuits on, so I don't know quite whether they'll be able to take any proactive action on your particular case, but some of their cases did receive that benefit. More by the government doing something than Red Eagle doing something. Now, Jesse Bless actually did something on some of his individual cases, and that's what caused this thing to start happening, I believe. Curtis, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's how it happened. And then, some of the Red Eagle cases started to get that same benefit, but kind of out of the blue. So, so whether Curtis will do something about that or not, I don't know. But that's what I would do if I were you. And yeah, but you're not contacting any embassy about this, right? Good afternoon. My region is Paul still on? If yes, when do we expect it to end? Yeah, that's what I've been talking about the whole time. We're waiting for the outcome of the lawsuits. And so, yes, the DV pause is still on. Will Trump change his mind and become more favorable to immigrants because of bad polling numbers for Republicans? No, because he cares most about his base, and his base care about him. They love this shit. They love it. They love the anti-immigrant stuff. It's a very big vote getter for Trump. If you're a MAGA supporter, you're very likely to be just applauding all this anti-immigrant sentiment, because they have been told over years and years and years that the immigrants have been coming here, taking their jobs, taking their wealth. Illegal immigrants have been killing people on the street in vast numbers, apparently. They've been told that Biden let in 20 million people, which is bullshit, obviously, but the MAGA morons believe that. So they've been told all this stuff for a long, long time. It's part of their identity, honestly. It's a big part of their identity as MAGA. They almost have to be anti-immigrant to be MAGA supporters, right? It's a part of who they are. And some of these people have gone out and spent fortunes, a lot of their money, and a lot of them don't have a lot of money, but they bought all the merch. They bought the hats, they bought the T-shirts, they bought the Trump flags, they bought the watch, they bought the shoes, you name it. These idiots have given Trump their money in unbelievable amounts because it's part of their identity, like they would support a football team or a particular athlete. They're such stupid cult following people that they have really bought into it that badly, right? And so to take the anti-immigrant sentiment away from them would be like taking away the favorite toy of a 3-year-old child, right? That child is going to cry and pee his pants and poop on the carpet, or whatever, like, and you don't want to clear up that mess. And so you're not going to take the kid's toy away unless you're an idiot. And I don't think Trump's really that sort of. He's an idiot in many ways. He's uneducated. He's daft in so many ways. But he's not stupid enough to shoot himself in the foot that way. So no, he's not going to take away the anti-immigrant sentiment simply because he's losing some support from within his base. He's going to try and keep his base. That's what he's going to do. Can we expect Asia 2NLs, especially for Nepal's no single case is scheduled for September KDU? I'm surprised if that's true. I would suspect KDU will schedule for September. Yes, so yes, I would expect you to get some more 2NLs. Can we apply for the DV lottery fiscal year 28? That will be, we'll have to wait and see. Let's get 27 out of the way first. Wow, you then posted that same thing like a million times. Okay. Where's my put user in timeout? There you go. Stop spamming, says Confusion. Quite right. Are there any embassies in the EU that haven't scheduled interviews yet? I'm sure there are some. I just don't know which there are. Will we see more 2NLs next week? I would not be surprised to see a few more 2NLs in the next few days. Yes. I think it's a possibility. I don't think we're quite done with 2NLs yet. We'll see, but I wouldn't be surprised. Good afternoon from my region. If the region is Paul still on, do we expect it? I've already talked about that. Hi, Simon. Thank you for the weekly update. Even though I've had nothing to say for weeks, I give a weekly update anyway. Is there a chance for an interview in Frankfurt? Yes. My number is EU43. It's quite high. We've not received the 2NL yet. Have a great weekend. So I don't know how far they're going to get in an individual embassy. I don't know whether Frankfurt have taken cases or not. Some of you will know better than I do about that. but fingers crossed. Even if they haven't taken, or if they have taken cases so far, that doesn't mean they can't add some more. So just be patient. Hi Simon, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, for my vacations. Beautiful place, right? I'm sure I've actually seriously considered if I wanted to live on the East Coast, where would I live? And that's one of the places that I would choose to live. But it's because I'm financially independent. I'm able to retire. I wouldn't necessarily live there to try and work there. And I'd be a bit worried about my daughter if she needed to make a living there. It's a great place to vacation and retire to. Not sure about living there and working there. Anyway, for my vacations, to keep my green card alive by staying in the US 3 weeks every 6 months. That's going to run out at some point. Remember, this administration are really bitchy. And so at some point, whilst the way to keep your green card alive in the past, that has worked in the past, you will start to have problems at some point sooner or later. So be careful about that. Hope you are fine and not too depressed by the pause by the orange dude. Yeah, I am a bit depressed about it, but I'm generally an optimistic person. So thank you. In your point of view, what do you think will be the judge only favourable for plaintiffs or for non-plaintiffs as well? I don't know. I'm not going to try and tell you that I lean one way or the other because I really don't know, which way is more likely. I think if you ask the lawyers, they think a plaintiff's only result is more likely. I've always thought from the very beginning that a non-plaintiff's result could be likely too, right? So, and I've said that from the beginning. So we'll see. And by the way, when I said that before the Dorcas result, and way before Dorcas ever came out. And so, although I wasn't quite sure how, fundamentally, I knew in my gut that at some point we would begin to see rulings that gave non-plaintiffs benefit as well. So, we'll see. If the Trump administration doesn't like DV lottery, then why don't they just pass a new law to remove instead of keeping everyone in limbo? It's hard. It's hard to change the laws in this country. Somebody said this the other day, where they said, look, they've got the White House, they've got a majority in the Senate and a majority in the House of Congress. That's all true, right? However, their majorities are very slim. And when we're talking about something as big, as important as immigration law, including DV lottery, because it's an overall part of immigration law, it's very difficult to get a large group of people to agree and to pass a law. It's very difficult, right? So you'll see bills being started left, right, and centre to remove the DV lottery or do this or do that. But those bills rarely make it past committee, they're not going to make it to a vote because the votes are going to be very, very hard to pass. So you need to see a government. If we had a Republican government, for example, with a majority of like 60 or 65 or something, like 65 out of the 100 senators in the Senate, and they had the House and they had a good majority there and the presidency, then yes, we might start to see some more radical changes coming on. But that's not the situation we're in. They've got a very, very small, slim majority. It means that every single one of the Republican senators has to vote on the law, and that's just not very likely to happen at the moment. So we're unlikely to see any meaningful immigration reform, which is what it would take to remove DV lottery. Okay. Hi, Big Papa. I'm not often called that. Hi, Simon Sir, Big Dog. I'm Big Papa, Big Dog. Simon Sir. Wow. How are you? Fun question. Do you have a favorite selectees every year? If so, do you have favorites this year? Cheers. I transferred from Warsaw to London, by the way. I do. I don't make a big thing of it, but there have been certain selectees that I fondly remember. And it's the ones that try and give back something generally. I mean, it's not always, but I have some favorites. So Philip, for example, Philip Pakura, he's done stuff, helping lottery winners. He did a scraper thing. He was a winner from last year. He didn't get his visa. Zarthisius, of course, who was a winner in DV 2017, I think, or 2018. We all know what Zarthisius has done for us. The original scraper, the original guy that wrote the first script that I was aware of, that gave me the script back in 2014, I think it was a guy called Rafikibo. That was his username, Rafikibo. And I got to know his name. There was another guy from Poland who I got connected with. I mean, there's been people over the years that I've met face to face, that I've spoken to privately. There's been, I've had favorites, of course. There's been people I've enjoyed a friendly argument with. There's people who've absolutely pissed me off. There's all sorts, right? But yeah, there are favorites every year. But since you call me Big Dog, Big Papa, and Simon Sir, I think you might be one of my favorites this year. I'm DV Selecting 26. My interview done 18th of December. 18th of December. But consular stamp on cancel without prejudice on my visa passport. Also, my medical already expired. Your DV lottery journey is not necessarily done. If we get an order that somehow benefits you, that cancel without prejudice visa could be reissued, but you will need to repeat the medical, and you will need to do something to push your embassy to reissue your visa. You're going to have to be proactive about that. If we get a situation, if you're either a plaintiff, or if you're not a plaintiff, if we get a judgment that covers non-plaintiffs. Okay, so watch carefully. I'm scheduled for an interview in Sydney next month. Should I attend the interview despite my country being on the list of 75 country ports? Yeah, I would say so, particularly if you're a plaintiff. My general advice is, if you're affected by the 39 country the 39 country ban, don't go to the interview unless you really know what you're doing and you've got some reason to do that. But if you're affected by the 75 country pause or the DV pause, of course, then I would personally be attending my interview in almost all cases. And for some of you, you might want to weigh up whether you're a plaintiff or not, and that will help make your decision. But for everyone else, for everybody on 75 country pause or the DV lottery pause, my general recommendation is to go to the interview if you can afford it. Now, of course, you're risking the money, right? So it's about the money and the time, essentially. That's your big risk. If you are so poor that the $330 and the medical fees would be seriously detrimental for you to waste that money, then you have to make your own decision about that. And there are plenty of people in that position, right? In poor countries. And so you have to weigh that up with your finances in mind, your position, right? It's up to you ultimately, because you may not get your visa. You may waste that money. It's a possibility, right? My medical going to expire on 10th of August. What is your best advice? You will need to repeat your medical. That's almost 100% certain, almost 100%. You will need to repeat the medical. If I were you, I would be contacting the physician now and saying, can you repeat the medical now, or do you have to wait? They will probably say, and some physicians will say this, that they don't need permission from the embassy, but they do need your medical to be expired. So, maybe you make an appointment for late August, for example. Have a word with the physician, discuss it with them. Some of them will just refuse because unless the embassy gives you permission to have the medical, they'll refuse. Check it out. I think it's two of you talking together. What's your opinion on Denver, Colorado? It's a nice place. I like Denver. It's a good city for many reasons. It does get crappy weather in the winter, but it's also near enough to the skiing areas that you can really enjoy it. You can be from Denver, you can be skiing within an hour or so, hour and a half. And Denver city itself is big enough that it's got a lot of good opportunities, good housing, nice location, very beautiful location, etc. Yeah, a lot of positives to say about Denver, Colorado, even though it's one of the colder places. So, it gets warm in summer, but it's very cold in the winter. Yeah, it's good. Hi Simon, DB selectee from SA, South America or South Africa, I don't know. 221G, only by the DB pause. And following your advice, we joined Red Eagle Law, class action. Okay, so you're in the Madani case, the Red Eagle Law 2. So yeah, fingers crossed for you. I think it should work out. Fingers crossed. What about the backlog of Riyadh? Don't know. I'm just going to quickly go through a few of these questions. I used your photo tool for my DV photograph back in November. Oh dear, I'm sorry. It's a good site to use, but unfortunately, you're going to have to do that again because it's over 6 months old now, right? By the way, I love. Happy to hear your wife is doing well. Thank you, Dunlop. Love yanking your chains back. Your optimism on the entry period. Don't get too worked up. I don't get too worked up about anything, to be honest with you. Dunlop J. I wonder which. So I need to know which of you is yanking my chain. Are you yanking my chain in BritSimonSays.com or here? Or I don't know. Yeah, I don't get too worked up. But it's not an individual person asking me the question. It's just it's the endless questions that sort of does get me into a rant sometimes. So sorry about that. But some people enjoy the rants anyway. So. For info, the Vienna embassy offered us to do the interview in September without the medical, and if the pause is lifted, to do the medical in time for the visa issuance. So no money for the medical wasted. I love embassies that do that. There have been a few embassies that have done that, and there have been a few individuals that have done that. There's a person who I know personally. Her username in a forum is Susie QQQ. And she and her family did exactly that, even though the embassy didn't really want to cooperate. She sort of did that in order to make sure the visa issuance, this was years ago, she was a DV13 winner, and she did that in order to extend the visa issuance validity as far as she possibly could. And so, yeah, some embassies do that, and I wish more would do that. It's a smart thing to do. So there you go. Do I have advantage of winning DV27 if it opens? Born and grown up in Saudi, hold high school diploma and Indian passport. You have no more advantage than anyone else entering the lottery, right? You have the same chance as anyone else in the same region. That's how it works. Gomez was filed on May 29th and Ivanov on March 15th. We have a ruling on Gomez, but still nothing from Ivanov. Do you know why? So Judge Mehta did have a good understanding. He had many hours of oral argument and lots of paperwork, etc. He understood DV lottery, and I'm sure just the fact that he cited his own case shows that he remembers that case, right? So I'm sure that was helpful in that particular case, but it was also a single case. It's much easier for a judge to make a decision in a lawsuit where it's a single case, and that is an advantage of a private lawsuit. They are normally faster because the decision affects one person, and so it's not such a big deal to give a decision early. When a decision is for broad relief, the judge in that scenario has to be much more careful because they know they're going to affect thousands of people's lives, and they know that the government are going to, probably be more aggressive about appealing that. And judges don't like to be appealed. Well, I should say they don't like to be overturned, right? So they don't. They're more normally cautious on group lawsuits. That's just the reality. We hope that wouldn't be the case, but that was just a hope. Somebody, like my friend John, was also complaining that the lawyers had originally asked for an early June answer, and then guessed it would be in July, and now it's going to be in August possibly, and so they don't have a clue. He was saying. Yeah, that's true. They don't, we don't know what the judge is going to do. We can guess, but they're just guesses. And most of you are adults. You should know that the guesses that we make in this thing are just guesses. They're not a guarantee. If you want a guarantee, buy a fridge, right? That's my saying. I need a T-shirt that says that. I've got one here that says Brit Simon says, but I need a T-shirt that says, if you want a guarantee, buy a fridge. Hey Simon, cheers for your overview on the Gomez case and your read of the current consolidated case. Fingers crossed we get the ruling we're hoping for. Yeah, indeed. My medical expires mid-September. I have a renewal appointment booked 14th September. Good, well done. Advised to insure issued by 30th of September. Otherwise, we should try and enter the US before the medical expires in September. Do what you want to do, or what you can do, right? If you do the September 14th medical, let's say we get an order and you're allowed to be issued, and you're issued, and you've got 2 weeks to go on your medical still, so you've got 2 weeks to enter. Personally, I would probably get on the plane and do a quick activation trip. That's what I would personally do. I'd rather spend $1,000 on an air ticket rather than $400 on renewing the medical to delay that and then still spend $1,000 later on the air ticket. So that's just me though. So you decide what you want to do, but you can do an entry activation trip. You don't have to stay more than 5 minutes, right? You can arrive, you can spend a weekend in America, and you can leave. It doesn't have to be a long trip. So that's what I would personally do, and partly because if you're issued, you want to do things as quickly as possible. When you get your visa issued and you've got it in your hand, you kind of want to run to the airport and get on with it, right? Go and use that visa. That's going to be important advice this year, right? Hello, Simon. I had a 221G for a missing grade 10 certificate. I submitted it the next day, May 8th. Could the lawsuit win, but I still not help my case? I mean, it's unlikely. They probably will have accepted your certificate, and now you're just on 221G because of the pauses. So don't worry about that. I'm sure that's going to be okay. But if necessary, communicate with the embassy and ask them. You can ask them, say, was the missing grade 10 certificate enough? Can you confirm that I'm only paused because of the DV lottery pause, and that you will issue my case if that pause is removed? Right? You can do all of that. There's no harm in you contacting the embassy and saying all of that. Whether they answer you or not is another question, but you can certainly ask. Okay. It's still on the government website that interviews are scheduled to start on October 1st and onward for DV27, but they haven't even announced the lottery yet. Do you think they'll announce the DV soon? Yes, it doesn't actually say what you're saying it says. It says that interviews will happen between October 1st and September 30th. That does not mean that they are saying, and it doesn't say in that announcement you're talking about, which is the November 5th announcement from last year. That announcement does not say that interviews will happen on October 1st. It doesn't say that. That's what you've interpreted in your mind, but that's not what it says. It says that interviews will happen in that time period, that they have to happen within the allocated time, essentially. But it doesn't mean they have to start on October 1st. That's not what it says. Are you sure that people can still get their visas on September 30th and then everything else after, and then move to America? Because doesn't it say that after the fiscal year, September, the time is finished? Of course, I'm freaking. I was about to swear, but I don't need to swear in this case. But I'm close to swearing. Of course I'm sure, 100% sure, because I've seen it. I've been doing this for 13 years. Do you think I'm an idiot? Really? Like, what? Sanzak? Yes, of course I'm bloody sure. Sorry, they say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but some questions are stupid. Of course I'm sure. I wouldn't say it like if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes for many, many years, right? So yes, people go to interviews on September 30th. How the heck do you think those people work things out if they have to enter the USA by September 30th? What are you thinking? Like, what? Deary me. Hi Simon, my friend went for a DV interview in Nairobi about 4 months ago. She was issued Form 221G. What happens when we get to September 26th and the DV pause is still in place? If the DV pause is not taken down before September 30th, then those cases just time out. They get no visa. They will never get a visa. The fact that they're on 221G doesn't matter. They're just timeout. That happens every year. We get cases every single year that stay in 221G beyond the 30th of September deadline, and therefore that case is dead. However, we have to wait and see whether that's going to be the case this year, and whether it will be the case in the case of your friend. Okay. Hello, hi Simon. My last name was changed when I was a child. What documents do I need to send if I apply for the DV lottery if it ever opens? Well, okay. In the DS260, there's a question that says, well, there's one question that says your legal name. So your legal name is what your legal name is. Most people who've had a name change, even in childhood, have got documentation or can get documentation, usually from a court or whatever the legal process is in your country, that shows that name change. Your name used to be this and now it's this. So that's now the basis of your legal name. And you need that typically because you'll probably have a birth certificate that shows your original birth name. In some countries they change it, but not always. So you have a birth certificate, then you have this other document that says a name change happened when this person was 5 years old, and so on. And so you need that documentation to show that the birth certificate you've got that says a different name is actually you, right? And you've probably had to deal with that in other parts of your life. It's possible that your birth certificate was changed as well. I've seen that in some countries, not very typical, but it's possible in some countries. And so it's a little bit different, but same sort of principle applies. Anyway, in the DS260, so when you enter the DV lottery, you enter with your current legal name, okay? And then when you fill out the DS260, which is after you've been selected, you fill out this online form, and in there it says, what's your legal name? You put that legal name in, and then there's another section that says other names used. And in there, you put your other name, right? Your original birth name, because that will tie up the records that you're then going to present at the interview to show the original birth certificate, the name change documentation, and so on. So yeah, that's what you need to do. You'll be fine though. Don't worry about it. No big deal. 1 year every entry one. Not quite right, Dunlop. It was in DV 2012. Everybody within the first 4 days had a much higher chance of selection. It's because of the actual technical explanation was that all of the winners came from one group of hard disks. There were multiple hard disks. The entries were spread over multiple hard disks, and because of a programming logic testing thing, it all got selected from the first hard disk or the first group of hard disks. Can't remember exactly, but it wasn't every person who entered was one. It was just a very high chance of selection from within that small group. But yeah, so it sometimes happens. Weird shit happens sometimes. In the lotteries I've watched, they've made mistakes in about 30% of the cases. They've made significant errors around about one time in 3 years, roughly. They often screw things up. I'm a DV26 Asia selectee with case number what? Oh, an AS 10,600 living in London. What are the chances of getting a September interview? You've got some chance. London is scheduling pretty well. And so, yeah, you've got some chance. A DV selectee from Sierra Leone, completed my medical, all required steps. Since our embassy is no longer processing visas, is there any update on whether the cases will be transferred to another country for visa issuance? Yeah, there's updates available. You need to read and see what is applicable in your particular case, and if necessary, contact the embassy and they'll tell you, what the situation is. Okay. Hello, Simon. I'm from Peru. Bienvenido, Lizette. I think we've spoken before. I've been in AP 221G DV26 since March. There have been no updates since then, but on July 24th, my file was updated for the last time. Could this be a good sign? People notice in SEAC database that there are updates that happen to their cases, and they often wonder why. In some cases, the reason is understandable. You've emailed the embassy, and then all of a sudden, a day or two later, there's an update on your case. And it's because you emailed the embassy, right? And they're simply recording something in your case file. There are other updates that are much harder to explain. We don't know why they happen. There is no logical pattern that we can ever ascribe to a series of updates. We don't know, for example, okay, if you got that update on July 24th, it means that within 10 days you're going to be issued. There's nothing like that, right? There's no sort of pattern that we've discerned. So we don't know what the updates generally mean, and therefore it's best to ignore them, right? Just ignore the updates. Just pretend they're not happening, because it doesn't matter whether you've got one update or 5 updates. There's no pattern that makes any sense. Right? We don't know what they mean. Okay. I think they will wait until September 18th when they will introduce a new I-485. They want people who will not be a burden to the taxpayers. No, Barney, that's not really sensible. So the new I-485 is only for adjustment of status cases, and it affects all sorts of cases, right? And so September 18th, there's new rules that are about public charge and how that's assessed and so on. But no, that's not really connected with the non-opening of DV27. That's, you're putting 2 plus 2 together and making 7. Since DV27 is not open and the policy review continues, is it possible that the DV26 visa number can be transferred and reserved even after September 30th? No, it's not possible. That would be against the law, and is difficult for the government to do. There are some things that they do that are overtly against the law, right? But generally speaking, they have used the deadlines to be a protection of sorts, etc. They've argued vehemently against extending, 1 year into another, etc. They've argued that endlessly, and so it would be really bizarre that they would do that. And there's really no benefit. They are trying to fuck with us, right? Why would they not try and do that? Like, they don't want to give these visas out. They're doing it under duress, essentially, right? So why you think they're going to take this very optimistic view that just happens to suit what you want to happen? You're just imagining stuff. It's like, I won't go into it because it's about religion, but there is a famous quote from a guy called Hitch, who talked about the sort of the way people sort of arrive at a religious belief, and it's one part of it is that you have to believe that all the natural laws are suspended in your favor because coincidentally that's what you want to happen, and you're basically just manufacturing what you want to be true, right? So as I say, that particular quote is taken out of context. The context is about religious belief, but still it's the same sort of thing. You're just thinking that because that's what you want to believe will happen, but there's no other reason to believe it will happen. There's lots of reason to believe it won't happen. So forget it. Hi Simon, would it be okay to arrive in the US for a few hours to activate my visas, go abroad for a few weeks and return to the US for a week, then go back to my home country and finish work before moving permanently? Yeah, all of that is okay. Nothing wrong with any of that, right? You just have to keep your absences away from America at less than 6 months these days. Keep it under 6 months. And you can't do that forever. Somebody asked earlier about keeping their visa alive by going to South Carolina. And it used to be that you could do that, and some people have got away with that for years. But in this sort of this political environment, I don't think you should be doing that for very long. Do it for a couple of years, maybe at most, but not beyond that. Okay. I'm a software engineer in the UK. I'm done faffing around with the DV. Should I just try to get an H1B in America? I've been told it's very difficult to get one. Would like to hear your thoughts. It's a lottery. Guess what? You're switching from one lottery process to another. The H1B process is a lottery. It's also got this $100,000 thing, and you're not really in control of it. So I got an H1 approval to come here in 2014. That's how I was here in 2014 when I adjusted status to DV. I've had H1 visas before. And so, yes, I know the process, and yes, it's difficult to have. Um, you're from the UK. You may have niche skills, right? You may have very good skills. You might have a very good track record, etc. You may have some reason why you're going to be more attractive to a US employer than local workers, right? It's a possibility. It's just you have to be pretty good at what you do, right? Um, Other than that, it's been a lottery, and other than that, there has been this $100,000 fee that has tried to make that more difficult to get those H1 applications through. That's in a bit of a limbo state at the moment with other lawsuits, but it's no picnic, and it's not fast. So I wouldn't quite give up on the DV lottery if I were you, but you can do both things at once, right? I did. I came on an H1 visa in February of 2014. And in September of 2014, I adjusted status to a DV lottery. So, you can do both. Yes, sir. Thank you. You're outstanding as always. We'll miss you till next Saturday. Best wishes to you and your amazing family. Thank you. That's lovely, lovely thoughts. Yes, sir. You're not being horrible, but you're being hilarious. There's confusion. At which point would you be considered a US person when the visa is issued upon entry or something else? Okay, be very clear. The different statuses, right? A green card is a lawful permanent resident. That's someone who is here with full permission to do everything else. But it's a bit of a probation period, I would describe it as. And after 5 years of living in the States on a green card status, you can then apply to be a citizen. So as an LPR or green card holder, you're not really an American. When you take citizenship through another legal process, which is fairly easy to do, but you have to wait 5 years, then you become an American citizen. And in some cases, depending on the laws in your country, you may have to give up citizenship in your own country. So I didn't. I'm still now a UK citizen and an American citizen. My wife is still a Spanish citizen and a UK citizen. My daughter is going to get Spanish citizenship, and she's got UK citizenship and an American citizenship. So she'll be a triple threat. If the world goes to war, I don't know who she'll fight for. We'll have to see. But yeah, so it sounds like how to become a software engineer. What was your path? Sounds like you asked a dopey question earlier, so I'm not quite sure this is open to you. But is this? You're not the UK person, right? No. UK software engineers are not normally asking the sort of question you asked earlier. How do you become? What a big question. It's probably outside the scope of this particular video. I would just say, in the old days, you would generally either have extremely good experience that you've gained somehow. You've grown up in some country, some company, and somehow exposed yourself to new technologies, and you learned programming or whatever, and you became really good at what you do, and you can get a job that way. Or you go down an education path where you go to university and you learn, etc. But the education path, I have to say, is looking less attractive these days. Because of what AI has done. Now we're going through a sort of rapidly changing thing. It's quite funny what's happened with AI. AI is without a doubt a life-changing tool. But right now, the economics of it, or the tokenomics of it, are hilarious. Every company that I know of did a massive change. So they started to lay off staff, saying, hey, this AI thing can mean that, we can get half the engineers doing twice the work if we give them all AI. And now the AI companies are monetizing their products so highly that now the companies are saying, oh, we've got to have a budget. We've got to stay within our budgets for these tokens. And so they're backing off on some of the AI work. And in fact, even in my own company, we expect some of the coders to hand develop some of their stuff now, even though AI can do that for them, because we don't want to spend the tokens on stuff that a coder should and can do. So we're in this sort of weird place, but without a doubt, within a few years, there will be less coding jobs available. More of the coding will be done by AI. and more coding will be done. More projects will be taken on, etc. It's exciting, without a doubt. But it does mean that it's going to be harder to break into that industry. And so, in one way, it's going to be harder, but in another way, it's going to be easier. The barriers to entry, in some senses, are being taken down. So if you're 14, 15, 16 years old, and you're not sitting at home with a computer using all the AI tools, then you're a bloody idiot. That's what you should be doing. If you're a young person, you should be using all these AI tools and developing little projects. If you notice the stuff I've put out recently on the DV tracker, the lawsuit tracker, the mail drop service, all these things I've put together, I've published on Brit Simon Says as little applications. They're all developed through AI. And so you should be doing the same thing. Get yourself little apps, develop little apps, do something with it, and build some skill sets. So do that, and then that might be the way you get into software. Okay, but you'll have to sort of find your own path in a sense. There are lots of people that have got, for example, here's one thing you can do. There are lots of people who've got crappy websites right now. You could go through an industry segment. Perhaps you go to retail stores in your area, for example, pick a fairly large area, and look at their websites and have AI do this for you. Have AI look at their websites and determine which websites need a revamp, and then contact those companies and offer to do their websites using AI technology and all sorts of things, make it sound good, and then do that work and do it relatively cheap and build up a track record of doing websites or doing some sort of app design work, etc. for people. Do all of that, right? But just do it in a professional way, a smart way. Don't do it like a school project. Make sure you're taking care of security and everything else. And that might be your way to get some experience under your belt and build your resume, which we would call a CV in most places. So there you go. Dunlop wants to tease me a little bit more. Simon, I still have hope that DV27 will be announced in 2 weeks. It won't, Brit, and I'll be here to say I told you so. Okay, we'll see. Okay, quick look to see if there's any more. Let's talk about this McLaw lawsuit. Okay, there is a company called McLaw that had planned to do some lawsuits. I think they were doing a round one lawsuit for DV Lottery, and some people signed up for that. Their price point was a little bit higher than the Impact or Red Eagle lawsuits. And their track record wasn't very good. And so I was a little bit nervous about the company. I contacted the company, the law firm, and reached out to them and introduced myself and offered to help in any way I could. And they sent back a polite response, but didn't take it up any further than that. And that's kind of odd. If somebody offers you free help, I was offering free help, right? And I'm, pretty expert in this area. If somebody offers you free help and you don't take that up, it's kind of like, okay, that's weird. Why are you not taking that up? If you're a smart law firm, you would take up that help. And they haven't contacted me since. So that's a bit of a clue. And then we saw that in some of the lawsuits, they were just making all sorts of mistakes in filing for, another filing. They made all sorts of horrible mistakes. Doing a pretty shitty job. There's been another law firm just recently that made some bad mistakes and did a shitty job. And, there is good lawyers and there's bad lawyers, right? And sometimes good lawyers can do, bad mistakes. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes good lawyers do good things and we have bad decisions by judges. There's all sorts of shit that can go down, right? But so, McLaw will do a round one, or they're in a round one. I think they may do a round two, but they are less experienced and they have made mistakes and quite public mistakes on some of the stuff they do. And so I'm a little bit nervous about recommending them. If there's no other boat to get on, sometimes you get on the only boat that's there, even though it looks leaky, that might be the situation. So, so do what you have to do, but that's my assessment of them. I'm in the process of divorce, but my interview is soon. Will there be a problem if I don't have the divorce papers for the interview? My wife was additional applicant to my application. No problem for you as long as you're the winner and she's not the winner, right? No problem to you. The fact that you're going through the divorce doesn't matter. Hopefully, like you say, you included her on your original application because you weren't divorced at that time. So, you'll be treated at the interview like a married person that doesn't have their wife with them. That's how you'll be treated, which is fine. You don't have to take your spouse with you to the interview if they don't want the green card, right? That's all that will happen, so that's fine. Okay. Ooh, interesting. Ronnie. It will be Ronnie. Oh dear. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. I'm just going to see if I can take one or two more questions and then we'll call it a day. If possible to go to the US before expiry and only after doing medical renewal, how to ensure insurance by September 30th? Well, you have to just do all you can. There isn't a trick to this. You have to nag the embassy sometimes. You have to sort of keep in contact with them. Just do the best you can do. Use your common sense, right? Do the best you can do. Does getting green card through the DV lottery make it easier once citizenship journey? Did you enjoy your World Cup? Your best team. Okay. Getting the green card through the DV lottery makes no difference to your citizenship process. It's still a 5-year time period, same as it would be on an employment case or any other case really, apart from marriage. Marriage is a bit shorter; it can be 3 years. But no special sort of process simply because you got a DV lottery case, right? Same as anyone else. Did I enjoy the World Cup? Yes, I did. Thank you. What was my best team? My best team got first and third place. So I'm from the UK, so I supported England, of course. My wife is from Spain, so I supported Spain, and I have family in Buenos Aires on my wife's side. So I was also sort of happy about Argentina if they'd have won, sort of. But then Argentina behaved like a disgraceful mob of muppets, and so they embarrassed themselves. And and also Messi got behind the Malvinas flag when they beat England, which was inappropriate. We kicked their asses before. We could certainly kick their asses again over Malvinas if we had to. Nothing has changed, and it's still a British place. So, shut up. to my family in Buenos Aires, I'm sorry, but but there you go. Christopher Hitchens, that's right, that's the Hitch. Simon, all these, right, last question then. Okay, good question. So let me just finish on this one. If all these impediments are legally addressed and DV issuance are resumed, I foresee some embassy, like in Nairobi, being overwhelmed due to the rest notices that add to them more tasks. And that's a very valid concern, right? It may be that some of these embassies have restricted their capacity because they know that if there is a sudden decision that says they've got to issue all these visas, they're building up a huge backlog of work to go print those visas, to issue those visas, and so on. And they feel like they didn't want to do that. That could certainly be the case in some of the embassies. I don't know, right? How they'll deal with that, I don't know. How some embassies probably won't cope very well. Other embassies will. We just don't know. A lot of it will depend when the order comes down, what the order says. I keep saying this, we just don't know until we know, right? We have to wait and see. But yeah, your thought process is not silly. There is a big backlog of work to be done. Issuing the visas isn't very complicated, to be honest. But it's not nothing, right? They simply press a button, and then a printer in the back end of the room starts printing out visas, and they have to stick that on. It's a bit of work, but it's not like brain surgery, right? we'll see. We'll see how long they can do that. I don't think it's going to be a huge problem in most embassies, but you mentioned one embassy where they'll have a lot of work to do. So yeah, we'll see. All right, everybody, we'll call that a day. I hope that was interesting today for you. Please do subscribe. Be one of the people that got me that. Oh dear, got me that thing. Be one of my subscribers, please. I appreciate that. Give me a thumbs up, like if you like this video, and I'll see you next weekend, if not before. I hope to see you before. Some of you will realize that when we get an order, I probably will do a little video about that, or go live and discuss it. But we'll see. So yeah, fingers crossed. Maybe I'll be talking to you earlier than we think. All right, everybody. All right, bye-bye. Bye-bye now.